Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone to our Sunday morning meditation. I'm Hugh Byrne and I'm one of the teachers for the Sunday morning class. For many years I was the person teaching the class, but for circumstances and lots of things on the calendar, there's now four of us who teach. We alternate. Let's get my view. The view is very important. I'll be sharing today, along with Laurie and Marina and Catherine, and then sometimes guest teachers that we can't. And the class is sponsored and under the auspices of the Insight Meditation Community of Washington, IMCW, and the Center for Mindful Living, which is part of IMCW, and we, as many of you know, had a center in Tenleytown, DC, for many years, for probably, I think, a decade. But then with COVID, and paying quite a lot of rent every month and not using it, we had to let go of the space. But by then, through the great work of, organizers and community volunteers, we developed this kind of very strong online presence, folks joining us from around the country. And so it's now, there are in-person activities more and more, but it's very much, very alive online as well. So through the Center for Mindful Living, and we have some in-person programs. I'll mention a couple of them at the end, coming up, including a day long that my partner Rebecca and I are teaching together next Saturday down in Tenleytown, DC. But all of that to say to say welcome to everyone, and recognizing that we are living in unusual times. The word unprecedented is quite used quite often, it's somewhat overused, but somehow I've been living here for almost 50 years, and I haven't lived through a time like this. And in so many different ways, just through what we've seen in the last 2 weeks has really been, I think the word I would use is stunning. Not surprising, but stunning nonetheless. The deportations, the cruelty, the inhumanity, the attacks on federal workers, on anything to do with diversity or equity or inclusion, those beautiful qualities that have been kind of turned into a kind of, a stick to beat people with and to use to divide. Anyway, I'm not going to get into that, but just to recognize that, and also to recognize that there may be a diversity of opinions. So I'm just giving my view, but I'm just kind of where I am. But just to recognize that this is a challenging time, and I'm sure for many of you, perhaps most of us, there's lots of things that we're working with in our hearts and our minds and our spirits and our bodies in these times, and a lot that can be very difficult to work with. And so it is, a great gift, I think, to have the teachings of the Dharma, the Dharma being, we often talk about the Dharma as the Buddha's teachings and practices that have come down through 2,500 years. But the Dharma is even bigger than that too. The Dharma is all of the wisdom teachings, all of the teachings of compassion, wisdom, and truth. Whether they come through Rumi or Rilke or from, whoever they come through, we know truth, when we ground ourselves. We know truth when we see it and hear it. And And it's that larger sense of Dharma, and very much the Buddha's Dharma, the Buddha's teachings and practices, this amazing path of training to awaken our hearts and to help others awaken their hearts. And so I want to welcome you to this space, this online space. Just appreciate all of us. You might take a minute to look at, we've got maybe almost 60 of us here together. Just, some of us are on screen, some of us are not on screen, but just to appreciate this being here together and really how important it is in these times, in this time and in these times. Because, the hallmark really of suffering, the word in the Buddhist teachings is dukkha. Again, a very central word in Buddhism, dukkha, suffering, unsatisfactoriness, feeling things that aren't the way we want them to be. When we're caught up in dukkha, whether it's fear or anger or rage or craving or whatever it is, there's a sense that, we're alone. I want this, or, I need to have this, or I need to get rid of these horrible people or things or whatever. We get caught up in that sense of I. And freedom really comes in recognizing that I is really, when we identify with it, it's suffering. And when we let go of that identification, we can find freedom. And we find the freedom really in community, in our interconnectedness, in what Thich Nhat Hanh would call our interbeing, that we're, and it's kind of this, and particularly at times like this, I think our remembering this is really important, because the only way we'll get through this in a healthy and, freeing kind of way is together, together here, in like this community and the larger spiritual community, but really the community of all beings, the community that recognizes recognizes that those who are causing harm are themselves very much part of the beloved community. Martin Luther King spoke about the beloved community, a community grounded in love and compassion, and that has to include everybody. And our journey has to, and our vision has to be towards that. And that's what the Dharma teachings, as well, kind of point us towards. And I say that as a kind of a longish introduction, because that's kind of the theme of what we'll be exploring today. I've got about 8 hours of talk ready to roll, but obviously I'm going to try and share what I can in like 30 or 40 minutes of talk. But just remembering that, and the power of community, the power of sangha, of this being together. So with that, I want to begin with a meditation. The format of the class is very straightforward. We, with the welcome, we begin with a welcome, and then have a period of meditation, which can help us get, arrive with and be with whatever's arising for us in the body, in the heart, the mind. And then I'll share some reflections. I think the overall theme today is the bodhisattva path to the beloved community, to that kind of vision of how we can live together as humans and as sentient beings on this earth. And then we'll have hopefully some time for sharing and announcements at the end, and we'll finish fairly promptly at 12 or close, around 12 o'clock. So good to see everyone. Welcome again if you're just joining us. So let's take 15 minutes or so to sit together. And I think probably most of you are very aware of the kind of the basic instructions, and so I'll kind of do some guidance, but hopefully leave some space too to just be with what's here. So take some moments to just arrive, to settle into a comfortable, relaxed posture. So sitting with your back straight, you could invite your shoulders to relax, hands wherever they're comfortable, in your lap or on your knees or on your thighs. If you like to, you can let your eyes close. Maybe they're already closed. Let your attention come inward. And consciously choose to kind of let go of the thoughts in the mind and let your attention come down, drop down into the body. Feel the body. Feel the contact with the chair or the cushion. Feel your breathing. Just be aware of the sensations of your body. And you might consciously put aside things, plans for the future, or things that are going on outside in the world. For this time, things that have happened, just allow yourself to be here as fully as you can. And you might find it helpful to take a few longer, deeper breaths to help you just settle and arrive. Nice deep in-breath, filling the chest, filling the lungs. And then long, slow out-breath, releasing, letting go. Imagine you're breathing out any worries or stresses or tension. Just let it go. Let them go. Breathing in, calming the body. Breathing out, calming the mind. And letting your breathing help you settle and be here. Be here with whatever's present for you right now. And it can be helpful at the beginning of a meditation to gladden the mind. The Buddha used this term, or what we translate as this term, kind of bringing warmth, maybe some joy into the heart and the mind, the body. And one way we can do this is to consciously invite a smile or a half smile to your face. Kind of just bringing the muscles around your eyes and around your mouth into the kind of expression of a smile. You know, the kind of smile that you have if you see a beloved friend or a child or a grandchild or a pet that you love. You might kind of invite someone or something that kind of brings that kind of joy, happiness into your heart and mind. Just bring their image in. Let the smile come into the heart, come into the body. And you might let the smile be an expression of how you want to meet whatever's coming up. See if you can meet it with the expression or the attitude of a smile. So the smile, the breath as a kind of a place to rest the attention, to ground the attention, just to be here. It can be helpful, particularly if there's anything that's challenging or difficult or painful, to put your hand on your heart, maybe a hand on your belly, and just connect with this life, this body, this heart, this breath. Holding whatever is here with kindness, with care, with compassion. Just open to what's present for you, what's alive for you right now in this moment. You might just invite in, what is around for you in these days. Maybe there's some challenging things, maybe there's some joys, whatever is present for you, just make space for what's here. Without any story about what's going on, just the direct experience. If there's sadness or anger around things that are going on, if you can just be with how it feels in the body, in the heart, in the mind. And just making space for what is here. Just allowing space for whatever wants to be here, whatever is here, to come, to be here, and then to pass whenever it's ready to go. So that nothing that comes up for us needs to be a problem if it can be held in kindness, with acceptance. The Sufi poet Rumi speaks of welcoming the guests, to treat whatever is coming, whatever's here, emotions, mind states, bodily feelings, thoughts, as a guest coming to visit, and not to hold on to the pleasant guests or push away the unpleasant ones. Just to allow space for them to just have their expression and then to go when they're ready to go. He says, welcome the guests, even if they're a crowd of sorrows who sweep your house empty of its furniture. Still treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. Goes on the dark thought, the shame, the malice. Meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. So just being aware of what's present and making space for what's here. And if it's helpful, you can use your breathing as an anchor, as a grounding, as a place to rest the attention. And when the attention goes off into thoughts of worries or concerns or stories, daydreams, memories, wherever the mind goes, just to, when you become aware of that, just gently incline the attention back to the body and the breath. In breath and out breath. Just coming back to the body, coming back to the breath, anytime. Remembering we can always begin again. Just here, now. Meeting this moment. As Dorothy Hunt says, peace is this moment without judgment. This moment in the heart space where everything that is welcome. Peace is this moment without judgment. This moment in the heart space where everything that is welcome. Just meeting whatever is present right now with kindness, with acceptance, with curiosity, with interest. Just this. I'll share this poem by Mary Oliver I haven't shared before. It's a difficult one, but I think an important one. It's called Lead. Here is a story to break your heart. Are you willing? This winter, the loons came to our harbour and died, one by one, of nothing we could see. A friend told me of one on the shore that lifted its head and opened the elegant beak and cried out in the long, sweet savouring of its life, which, if you have heard it, you know is a sacred thing, and for which, if you have not heard it, you had better hurry to where they still sing. And believe me, tell no one just where that is. The next morning, this loon, speckled and iridescent, and with a plan to fly home to some hidden lake, was dead on the shore. I tell you this to break your heart, by which I mean only that it break open and never close again to the rest of the world. I tell you this to break your heart, by which I mean only that it break open and never close again to the rest of the world. So just in these final couple of minutes, being present with whatever is arising in the body and the heart, the mind and the spirit. And feeling yourself part of something larger. Just everyone here together today, this community, this Sangha, but also the much larger community of everyone who wants to build a more compassionate, more peaceful world. Millions and millions, millions and millions. Deeply concerned about what's going on right now. And then taking it even larger to include all the humans, all those who are, we might see as causing the harm, that we include them too. All beings, as the Dharma teaches us, all beings are awakening beings. All are part of what Dr. Martin Luther King spoke of as the beloved community. Even in the most painful times in the civil rights movement, he would remind everyone that no one should be put out of our hearts, out of their hearts. I'll just share a quote from him on this. He says, I've seen too much hate to want to hate myself, and every time I see it, I say to myself, hate is too great a burden to bear. somehow we must be able to stand up against our most bitter opponents and say, we shall match your capacity to inflict suffering by our capacity to endure suffering. We will meet your physical force with soul force. Do to us what you will, and we will still love you. But be assured that we'll wear you down by our capacity to suffer. And one day we will win our freedom. We will not only win freedom for ourselves, we will appeal to your heart and conscience that we will win you in the process, and our victory will be a double victory. It was from his 1967 sermon, The Peace. So feeling us, experiencing us together today, not alone, not separate, but part of that larger, part of that beloved community. Take your time coming back, kind of opening your eyes, coming back into connection with each other, kind of more the outer being together. Welcoming anyone who joined us during the meditation. And if you would like to, if anyone would like to, if many would like to, I'd just be interested if you have like 2 words, 3 words, just to share what's present for you, what came up for you in the meditation. What are you, what's in your field right now, whether it's challenging or difficult, or whether it's heart opening or warm or whatever, and anything in between. Please, if you would be willing, just put a couple of words in, 2 or 3 words. It'd be nice to just hear from everyone. It's not so easy for to have a kind of more of in this context a dialogue, and we have it's probably helpful to to be able to kind of lay something out and then have some discussion. But if you'd like to do that, and I know maybe if not, that's fine too. I'm happy to share, but yeah, it'd be nice to get a sense of what's present. I say for myself, I think the predominant thing is just the gratitude for community, for Sangha, for being together in this way. Gratitude for the teachings and the practices that certainly for me, kind of give me a way of holding all that's going on without being, not that I'm unaffected, probably none of us are unaffected, but that would be strange if we were, but not so much tossed around by things that are going on. That we can find a steadiness, we can find a equanimity, we can find peace. We can, in that metaphor of, finding the peace at the center of the hurricane, as it were, that pace of peace. Sylvia, fear, sadness, connected, a little more harm. Thank you. Michelle, opening heart to all, leaving no one out. Beautiful. Oh, thank you, Michelle. Gracefully, Tamdan. half a cup of sad, teaspoon of hope. I love that. Julie, thank you. Rowan, feeling wronged. Sorry to hear that. Pamela, I saw an axe in meditation and interconnected, reverberated as well. Thank you. Peggy, focus on staying grounded in the present moment. Thank you. Mo, remembering the connection amidst despair. Thank you, Mo. Haverly, when you said to accept whatever it is we were feeling, I realized I was feeling frustration and despair. This is why I'm here, to get back to something more positive. Thank you, Haverly. I'm glad you're here. Pam, I feel great gratitude that at least some progress towards Dr. Martin Luther King's dream has been made, but fear that progress is being derailed right now. Yeah, that's really important. And also remembering the arc, that there are up tilts and downward spirals, that we take the longer view. Thank you. Jenna, heartbreak, care, despondency, overwhelm, alchemy, curiosity. Thank you, Jenna. The full catastrophe. Zoe, trying to accept reality, very difficult. Dorothy, wounded warrior. Thank you. Nancy, I feel more wrapped in comfort after our meditation. Thank you. Stacy, sad, disappointment, fear, but trying to stay open and loving to all I interact with. Thank you. Jeffrey, facing our shadow and opportunity. Thank you, that's beautiful. Angie, rattled, worried, very sad. Thank you. Rachel, while feeling exhausted from anxiety and fear, I try to remember that nothing is permanent. Thank you, that's really important, remembering impermanence. Pamela, hoping to stay open to see what's true. Act when feasible. Thank you. And Susan, maybe I'll finish here and we'll come back to some. Remembering Dr. King's instruction to expand the capacity to experience the suffering, the pain of these times. Remembering another teacher's instruction to let the heart break, for your breaking heart will only reveal a core of love unbroken. Thank you, Susan. That's beautiful. And Hisham, love is stronger. Thank you. Love is stronger, and truth is stronger than lies and dishonesty. And that's something to really remember. I have a quote. I'll probably find it. I want to get it kind of somewhat accurate from Gandhi. I know I write these things down, but I forget where I wrote them down and stuff. But it's that tyrants come, but they all fall. In the end, they all fall. Everyone, he says in that quote. So, paraphrase. So, thank you everyone for sharing all of that, and feel free, if anyone will come back perhaps later to hear what others share. What I'd like to do is to talk. I've been giving a lot of talks, sharing a lot over the last, particularly 3 months. It's almost 3 months now since the election, November 5th. One theme has been really central for me in this time, and I want to kind of speak to that. And that's this theme of the Bodhisattva, the being who is committed, kind of the modern framing of it might be any being who is committed to waking up themselves, to finding freedom in their own hearts, and is committed to the awakening, as in exactly the same way, committed to the awakening and the freedom of all beings. It's this. I'll talk more about it as we go along, but that's that sense. Originally it was the sense of somebody, a great spiritual, teacher, whatever, that kind of awakens, but rather than just passing on, from this realm chooses to stay in the realm of suffering until all beings are liberated. That's the kind of archetype, the ideal of the bodhisattva, someone who is so committed to the suffering of the world, they stay in the realm of suffering until all beings are free. Keep doing the work, as it were. So, we had a kind of quite a big thing this last weekend that IMCW organised on. It was called "When the Rubber Hits the Road," the Dharma in difficult times, something like that. And I was part of that and talked on. And some of you may have been there. We had, quite a lot of folks at that. Tara was there, and Sharon Salzberg, and Bob Thurman, and some wonderful teachers. That's that theme of really, that's kind of I've been talking, and other teachers have been really focused on in this period. How can the Dharma, how can these teachings and practices support us in these times? And I imagine that's why many of you are here, particularly today. I mean, some come all the time, but particularly. And so, I've been just thinking today about the framing of this, of kind of sharing today, and it came to me just earlier today that one way I want to, maybe it might be helpful to do that, is just through a little bit of a story, my own story of kind of coming of why and how this practice has become so central to me, so central to my practice, and also to what I've been teaching on. And I kind of begin by saying, I've shared a little bit in a talk or couple of talks, my own personal journey. I don't talk about myself a lot in these teachings, but I think, having a sense of how this has become so central to me might be helpful for folks, and might be somewhat encouraging or inspiring, or whatever, encouraging at least, to explore these teachings and practices. I gave a talk, I can think it was originally Tara's class before the pandemic, which I called The Journey and the Path. And it kind of spoke some of that, my own journey. And I used Mary Oliver's poem, The Journey. Many of you are familiar with that, and maybe I'll share it at the end or something. But it's basically, one day you finally knew what you had to do and began, though the voices around you kept shouting their bad advice. And I'll share the rest later, but hopefully. But it's a wonderful Dharma talk in about 20 some lines of poetry of coming from a place of suffering, with all of the things we feel, people telling us, do this, don't do that, do it. And in the middle of all of that, hearing that inner voice and beginning going on that path. And then she talks about the journey of the road full of fallen branches of stone, but little by little, as you left their voices behind, you heard a new voice that you slowly recognized as your own, that kept you company as you strode deeper and deeper into the world, determined to do the only thing you could do, determined to save the only life you could save. So in the end, I shared most of the poem anyway, but that kind of arc of that journey, you come out of the suffering, out of the dukkha. You realize you've got to go, and even though it's lots of turmoil and turbulence, you kind of find your way through the stones and the brambles and all of that, but you continue to follow, as the stars began to shine through the sheets of clouds, and there was a voice that you slowly recognized, that you continue, determined to do the only thing you can do, determined to save the only life you could save. And I use that as the poem as a metaphor for my own journey, and the metaphor of the journey and the path. And And so, at that talk, I talked about the journey and the path. And I just talk about a couple of the main elements. I get, kind of my story. I was born in London, Irish Catholic family, 9 children, post-World War II. Tough going. We never went hungry, but the phrase that I remember from my mother, one of the most common phrases was "making ends meet." I can't make ends meet, making ends meet, and that metaphor of kind of can I get the £2.50 a week to buy all the food that we need to have, and get Mary a new pair of shoes because she's starting, and all of that stuff. So, but we did well. We did okay. We were an immigrant family, and immigration has been part of my kind of physical journey and my kind of ancestors, last few generations from Ireland. But anyway, I was, we grew up Catholic, and my mother was very religious when I was growing up, and that helped her through. But I kind of left religion, it seemed for me, it was like, no. At the age of about 14 or 15, it was like, it seemed all about dogma and doctrine. I realize now that there's more to it, but at that time it was, and probably many here had similar experiences. No, that doesn't, believing stuff, and following rules and stuff wasn't what I was looking for at the time. And for about 20 years after that, I came to live here. I won't go into all of that story, but, for family, relationship reasons, and my daughter, coming back here with her mom. And I didn't have anything to do with religion. I was very much a kind of like, it's, what was important to me was, build a better world, and engaging in, political activity, trying in the way as I saw it then to struggle for justice and equality and peace. And I was, I was a bit academic work, and was working on a PhD in Los Angeles back in the 80s. And also that was when I was very intensely involved. I worked for, 10, 15 years around Central America, particularly 12 years from 80 to 92. And I was a full-time organizer, and we were, organizing demonstrations and, putting pressure on Congress, and making visits down to, mainly I was focused mainly on El Salvador in that period. And it was very, very intense. And I that was kind of like very much caught up in that. But something happened I think it was 1980, 86. The story background isn't very important for the point here but I happened to be reading a book by Alan Watts called The Way of Zen. And I wasn't really interested in Buddhism. It seemed much too quiet and much too passive. And but this book, Zen, had a little bit more of a cachet, folks coming out of the 60s. It was a little bit more Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, and those kind of like sex, drugs, rock and roll, and a bit of Zen thrown in, So Zen was a bit different from the other kind of Buddhism. So, but it was actually having an effect on my mind and my, something was, even though there were lots of these words, I didn't quite, what is Kensho? What is Satori? But something was happening. And I had this experience. I was in Salt Lake City with my then partners and our young baby child, Joe. And I was up at the university. I was doing my stuff about planning. When I got back, we were going to organize this, and we were doing a big demonstration in Los Angeles and all of that. And I didn't know quite. I'd only been there once before or twice before, and I didn't know the way home. And I was in this place of like, is it this way? Is it this way? And it felt like all this tightness built up, and then everything fell away. It all fell out. And there was this voice inside me that says, just walk, just walk. And then it was like, obviously I found my way back, and it was like, but I shared this in this earlier talk, that for months I lived in a place of great happiness and peace. And I tell the story of actually, part of the organizing. I used to have to come to LA, come to DC a few times a year for organizing and stuff. And I remember coming down up or down the escalator at DuPont Circle and saying to myself, I'm very, very, very happy. And there was this happiness that I experienced that was very different from anything I'd experienced before. Anyway, all of this is to say, after a while, it kind of old habits came back in and stuff. It wasn't, I didn't go off into, peri-nirvana or anything, but it was something. What I saw about that was it kind of opened my spiritual journey. And afterwards, I went on this kind of not so much physical trek, but a trek within the consciousness, reading the Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads and Meister Eckhart. And, you probably, many of us are probably familiar with some of these things, as well as the Buddhist texts. But it wasn't about Buddhism per se, but it was just about realizing, like the Mary Oliver poem, the journey, that I was embarking on this journey. And for about 5 years, I was on this, wandering, I think, in the spiritual marketplace, of kind of like, knowing that something was out there, and, wasn't looking for particular things, but just wanting to get more and more and see where this led. So that, was, obviously my early childhood stuff had some impact on that, I'm sure, but for this kind of journey, and that was kind of an embarking on that journey, and kind of knowing that was something it was kind of a search for, I wouldn't necessarily have been able to articulate exactly what it was a search for, but it was a search. It was a search for, something that was connected to the understanding and the happiness and some sense of joy that I'd come to experience, that was what in Buddhism would be called a non-sensual joy. It's not a joy for having a lovely meal or even getting into a new relationship or anything, but a kind of a joy on the level of consciousness and being, and didn't have to have anything to have it. It was just a kind of breaking through to that. So that, and that kind of the next phase of it, I saw as that, some colleague, had gone to a retreat up in Massachusetts, and he'd gone to a meditation retreat, and I've gone, oh, that's interesting. And it was a teacher who was both a Buddhist meditation teacher, but also very actively concerned about the world and environment and equality and justice and all of that. And so I went to this retreat, and it was a 10-day silent retreat up in Barre, Massachusetts, at the Insight Meditation Society. And so this was 1992, I think. And I had this experience of like coming home to something I knew within myself, a sense of peace. It was a struggle. It was a lot of struggle sitting still. I hadn't really meditated for more than maybe a few hours or maybe a day, and it was like sit, walk. Many know the the drill. Have lunch, sit, walk, sit. And it's a lot of struggle in there, but there was also a kind of a willingness to be with stuff, as we talk about. And, that first retreat was a kind of like, oh, yeah, this is this peace. This is what I am kind of looking for. And it was like, oh. And I said to myself after, I said, I think this is one of the best things I've ever done. I'll have to come back and do another one. So I think the next summer I came back to do another one. And it was a similar thing, still sitting with things. But I had another experience of like just of a deep falling away of things, and a sense of deep peace and freedom. And again, for a very significant period of time, at least a number of months, I kind of was living in a place of great, of real peace and happiness and joy, much different than my life, as it had normally, yeah, as it had been. And actually, I was halfway through writing my PhD dissertation, and I had, like, right in the middle, this happened. I thought, I've got to let it go. I've got to, so for about 3 months, I was doing a chapter a month, and I just let it go and I found my way back to it afterwards for a while. Yeah, after it, but for at least 3 months, I was kind of in this place of really just the joy of everything everything was joyful, and again, kind of ups and downs and things, but and again, different, and I could talk about this at another time, different kind of habits of mind that hadn't been kind of resolved kept coming back, and ways I was living were maybe that weren't that skillful, were unwise, and to maybe leave it at that needed to be explored. So things kind of that kind of came back to a little bit more like everyday life, but something had been seen. And for me, this was like this, what I characterize this as is like, this was like finding the path. I was on the journey, and now I found the path. And the path for me for the last 30 plus years has been the path of the Buddha's teachings and practices. And for 10 years or so, I practiced. I went on retreats. I went to India 3 times and did meditation retreats there, where the Buddha, had his awakening in Bodh Gaya, traveled around there. And, this, and not want to get too much detail, but I made a choice at the end of the 1990s, as we were coming to Y2K, to leave my job and to, I'd been, this teacher, my main teacher had kind of said, well, maybe you should start thinking about, if you want to teach or share these teachings with others. He didn't have a path or a training course or anything. He just kind of go out and do your thing. And so I finished my job in December of 1999. And I said to myself, where do I want to be when it turns to the, new millennium? And I said, I want to be under the Bodhi tree in Bodh Gaya, where the Buddha was awakened. So I went there and, spent 3 weeks on retreat there. And then I came back, and from then on, I chose this would be my path, would be practicing and teaching, sharing these teachings. And, that's been a journey, and getting involved in Insight Meditation Community of Washington and all of that. And I'm going to, what do you call that? Compact that too very quickly. For the last 20 or so years, I've been practicing and teaching. And, the journey has been a profound one, but very much not anymore of any very profound kind of those experiences of that that got me on the journey and then got me on the path. But something, obviously things that were happening on a kind of a more day-to-day practice, and the changes that come and the deepening of the practice, but not those kind of big waves, that I'd experienced. But what I want to focus on is just this kind of period that we're in now. And I want to reflect that when Donald Trump was elected, what I call T1, the first time around back in 2016, I engaged, very much with the challenges of that, both in my practice and in my teaching. And, I did a year-long program with a colleague, Kyra Jewell, of engaged Dharma, a year of engaged Dharma. So I was really, one of the things I've been most focused on in the teaching over these last 25 years has been how to bring together the spiritual practices of awakening with how to engage in the world, how to engage with the suffering of the world, with the social and the political and the economic, all of that. But what I have to share is that I think I never, how do I put it? I never really grieved fully, the loss of that time. I remember having a conversation with Tara Brach at a retreat. We went out for a walk, and just after the election, the first election of Trump, and she talked about the grieving that she'd been through, and I think that's and I realized that I hadn't really grieved, and I think I never fully grieved that whole period. I talked a lot about unmourned grief over the years, but there was a way in which I don't think I fully touched into my own grief underneath all the other things, the anger and the fear and all of those things. So on some level, I think I was operating and have been operating from a place of, of reactivity to what was going on, just of like, obviously trying to frame it very much within the Buddha's teachings, but on an inner level, there was still this resistance to what was happening. I think a story in the mind that this shouldn't be like this, this shouldn't be like this, which is the kind of hallmark of suffering, that I don't want this to be like this. This person shouldn't be doing the things that they're doing. And even though, I certainly talked and practiced kindness and acceptance, there was a way in which that resistance was very much that kind of, there's resistance in a good way and there's resistance, but that inner resistance was kind of, I think, very strong in me and continued to be. And it's funny, but that, as we came into what was this last year called 2024, I have a EU passport, and it kind of went through my mind, this could happen, and maybe Ireland would be a good place to live, that the thing, maybe others have been through this kind of mental thing. But for me, it was a possibility because I could live in 27 countries of Europe and work there if I wanted to by having a passport. So I actually thought, but what was interesting was, as the election, going, I did, what I could, as probably everyone here did what they could to try and bring about an appropriate outcome to the election, one that would be helpful for beings moving forward, always realizing that it might go the other way. Something happened to me on election night where, I went in, like many, I think, with some level of optimism, but no, not real confident that we knew how it was going to go. But as the evening wore on, I remember, something kind of that felt significant happened. I saw, probably an hour or two into the results coming out, I saw where the arrow on the New York Times thing was going, and kind of just the underlying messages that were coming out of the early returns, and kind of like, I think I see where this is going. And something happened there that like there was it felt like a stiffening of a spine and a steadiness, and there was kind of an inner voice that said, I have to show up. I have to show up for this, and however it unfolds, for whatever comes of it. And what I'd been teaching over the years a lot about the Bodhisattva path, this path of a commitment to the awakening of all beings. And what really happened was that kind of my internal view shifted from a kind of a me view. What does this mean to me? How will this impact? I don't mean in a selfish kind of way, but just how we do tend to view things through our own lens, through our own family. What will it mean? All of this. Something shifted to the all beings lens, to kind of like, okay, this isn't about me. You know, I'm a relatively privileged, as many of us here are pretty privileged in many ways, not all of us, but there's a lot of, you know, different things that give us a cushion that somebody who's undocumented, you know, around the corner from me here doesn't have, and many others don't have, and people from vulnerable communities don't have. But what shifted for me was this kind of sense, oh, this is us. This is about us. And throughout this period, everything has been come through this lens, this understanding, this way of seeing and way of being of all of us together holding this. And looking at the path, looking at my practice as being the bodhisattva path, the showing up not for, you know, not just kind of to awaken my heart. Yes, obviously that's, you know, that's key to everything. How do I work with these emotions? How do I work with these mind states? But to frame that, you know, to open that to that larger frame of all beings, of the freedom of all beings, that my well-being, my happiness, my freedom is not in any way different from or more important than anyone else's, you know, anywhere else in the world. And the bodhisattva path for me has been, in this period, has been, you know, a dramatic kind of shift. So what it has meant to me is that I don't feel fear in this period. There was underlying fear there before, and there was also a sense of separation. You know, not a card, you know, bad people, they're terrible people. I wasn't in that mode, but some underlying kind of sense of, you know, that we have the right view, and they, you know, they have the wrong view. Again, not to kick them out. There was an understanding that we're all, you know, all beings, but it was a more conceptual thing rather than a kind of a deeper heart grounded, you know, getting it. It was like the elevator stopped at the second floor, you know, but it really needed to kind of go right down into the basement, you know, and the basement for me is the bodhisattva path. It's like realizing at the deepest level that this is us, not me. And so, you know, I don't mean this in any way as, you know, an achievement or anything. That's completely irrelevant to all of this. It's just the sense of, okay, the freedom that comes when you let go of that smaller identification kind of with the I, with like, you know, my fear or my whatever, my needs, and even if it's a wider why of us, a wider I of us, you know, us, my community, my family versus the others out there. But the us, to see the us as all of us, to see really all of us. And not just the human beings, but the other sentient beings and all beings, to shift to that mode, that way of seeing. That's really, for me, what the Bodhisattva path is about. It's about that shifting of the view, and out of that shifting of the view naturally comes compassion and the wish to alleviate suffering wherever it's found. Now, I have another 45-minute talk now where I get into, but I'm joking, but because I'm not going to do that, but we'll get into the content of the Bodhisattva. So I'm just going to name a few key elements of that. I think the most important thing is or one of the most important things is what I've just shared, which is the potential of the Bodhisattva path to kind of undermine fear and undermine enmity, having enemies, seeing anybody as enemies, seeing Donald Trump as enemies, or MAGA as enemies, or anything as enemies, anyone as enemies. To see that truly, truly deep down in our hearts, that every one of us, including all the people you could name who are doing the things that we think are so harmful, so painful, they are part of the beloved community too, that they are suffering beings. I'm not saying that we should kind of put them front and center and, certainly not give them a pass or condone anything that's being done. To be very clear that harm is harm, that people creating suffering, causing suffering, are doing unskillful, harmful things, to be absolutely clear on that, and hold them in our hearts. As with the quote from Dr. King, earlier, that everyone, to keep everyone in our hearts, and to have the vision be, how do we move to that community where everyone is in there? Obviously, in practical terms right now, we're a long way from that, aren't we? If Kamala Harris had won, it wouldn't have been. I don't think we'd be that much closer, but we'd be. In fact, there are certain things. This kind of gets into bigger questions, but sometimes things have to kind of be radically kind of undermined in order for us to be able to move forward towards something that is more just, more equitable, more sustainable, where we really address the deeper levels of things. So the Bodhisattva path, Bodhisattva means being. Bodhi is awakening, and Sattva is a being, an awakening being. It's someone, any one of us, who chooses to have that vision and that commitment to compassion, that kind of, again, it's a training, it's a practice. We don't kind of suddenly, say, oh, I take on the Bodhisattva path, now suddenly everything's easy. No, we'll still get caught up in confusion and anger and fear and all of that. But we come back to that frame of all beings, may all beings, and not just on the outer level, not just as a kind of a framing or an understanding, certainly not just as words, but to really allow that understanding to go deep into our hearts, that all of us, that we have to move, because if we don't, we're just going to keep on reproducing the suffering that's come down through the centuries. I talked last weekend at this talk, I talked about that we're in an acute crisis that's part of a chronic crisis. The acute crisis is this moment we're in here, which, calls for all hands on deck and calls for action, compassionate action, but engaged action. But within the chronic crisis, which is the crisis that's led us to racism and to wars and to 26 billionaires having as much wealth as 3.8 billion people, 3.8 billion, something completely out of kilter in all of that. And all of the ways in which, in the Buddha's kind of framing, greed, aversion, and delusion get brought into the collective, life of the world. As Blaise Pascal said, all of humanity's misfortunes come from man's or our inability to sit quietly in a room alone. The fact that we can't be with our experiences, that we they're too much for us. We blame somebody else, and we put it out there on the world. And then when we do that collectively, it results in apartheid, it results in slavery, it results in wars, it results in, all of the things that are manifestations of ignorance, really. And the problem is always ignorance. It's the polarity that has a meaning is wisdom and confusion, wisdom and unconsciousness. And the path is to find our way out of unconsciousness to wisdom, and to recognize, that those who are causing harm are themselves suffering, hurt people, that we include everybody in this, in the beloved community. So all of this is kind of like a kind of an underpinning for, one to say that this for me has been, it's I talked about kind of the, finding the journey and then finding the path. And the way I kind of framed it or it framed itself, I didn't frame it, it was framed come from somewhere, was this is the way. I found the way. For me, in this period, the Bodhisattva path being the way to engage with all of this that's happening. That this within the Dharma, within the Buddha's teachings of the Dharma, this understanding, this Bodhisattva understanding, is really a very decisive shift and opening and expansion. Again, I could go into a lot more history of all of that. I would just say it this way. There's been 3 or 4 in my mind, and I'm just pulling this from my own mind, 3 or 4 major changes, maybe a handful more, I don't know, in the last 2,500 years of Buddhism. But I think this Bodhisattva path 2,000 years ago, 500 years after the Buddha's life, was one of the most important turnings of the wheel of the Dharma. It was in the northern tradition, what's called Mahayana. And along with maybe the development of Zen, the development of the Vajrayana, the Tibetan Buddhist path, those handful of things, maybe the spread of Dharma around the world, those things would be my handful of things. There's probably 1 or 2 more, but of the turning of the wheel of the Dharma. And I think it's hard to find any other of the teachings that quite so clearly kind of invite us into this very, very challenging period that that lies ahead for us, more clearly and in a more supportive way than engaging with the Bodhisattva path. And it's almost as though I'm doing this as an advertisement for what I've got coming up, but I'm doing a program on this that begins actually next Sunday. So if you're interested in the follow-up to this, I'm really, really enthusiastic about it. We've got a great group of people. I'd probably be about 60 or so people. It's online. It's just once a month. And it's actually exploring this in our own lives, how we bring the Bodhisattva path to America, here, and the world in whatever this year is, 2025, into 2025, and the incredible struggle that we're in the middle of right now, or challenges, let's say, that we're in the middle of in this period. I think. So just to, if you're interested in following up in that way, I'm going to continue in the regular Sunday classes kind of on this theme. But I guess my invitation to finish here is to kind of, each of you, if you'd like, is to just think of, what would it mean for you in your life and your practice to kind of take on this way of seeing, of letting go as much as you can of the personal, like what, the kind of personal identification of it with self that we kind of get caught up in, and to open to this sense of all of us together, awakening together, and that everything, is the vision and the hope is, and the aspiration is for the awakening of everyone. How can this serve? How can my actions serve the awakening of all beings? Not just my personal needs, not even my personal practice of finding a little more freedom, but all beings. What would that look like? Would it look like helping somebody in your life that may need care and attention and compassion? Might it be getting involved in, supporting the immigrant community in the face of deportations? What would that look like? Could look like many, many different things. And so that's kind of the invitation. What I would like to do is, I know Karen has to, you've got to leave at 12:15, but I would be happy to stay around and chat if anyone wants to talk about this anymore afterwards. I think you said I've at least for like 20 or 30 minutes, so that, and we'll finish the class at 12, but if anyone wants to continue the discussion then. So this was kind of an attempt to just kind of extemporaneously kind of talk about how my own journey to why this is so important to me for this time that we're living in particularly, but generally, because everything, the climate crisis and everything else that's going on around us, irrespective of what's immediately happening here, that's all calling for our care, for our compassion. But I'll stop it here. As usual, I've taken a while, but I will stay around. Jenna, I think Karen, are you going to share those links that I sent?
Yes, I sent the one in response to Jenna, but I will send all of them.
Yeah, if you could put that into folks so everyone has them. I think just given time, what I'll do is just mention, let's see, I'll just mention 3 of my own things coming up that Karen's going to share in the chat. One is Rebecca, my partner Rebecca Hines, and I are teaching a day-long retreat at the Iona Center, Senior Center in Tenleytown next Saturday from 9:30 to 4. It's a lovely place. They've been very generous and kind to us. They're helping us allowing us to have a weekly in-person meditation class on Saturday. So if you're interested in that, that's every Saturday in Tenleytown. But this coming Saturday, we'll be doing the retreat. So that'll be what will be going on there. So that's on equanimity and compassion. I mentioned this 5-month program, February to June, called Embodying the Bodhisattva Path, something like that, in these challenging times. It's just a 2-hour session on a Sunday afternoon, the second Sunday of the month. So it begins next Sunday afternoon at 1 p.m. So if you're interested in that, Karen's sharing the link to that. And then Rebecca and Luisa Montero, another long-time IMCW teacher, teaching us spring retreat in person down just north of Charlottesville at the new Seven Oaks Center. And we're happily teaching a retreat there in the spring and late April. So the information on that. Also, just to mention, these teachings are freely offered. If you would like to make a donation in the spirit of dana, generosity, which is how the teachings have come down through 2,500 years,